Space London. I will speak a little bit more about WOD in a while, but I just wanted to start by thanking our partners and our speakers today because I tend to forget. So, firstly, thank you to Perkins and Will for hosting us in their beautiful space today. Thank you to our partners at your bureau for supporting this initiative on sustainability with WOD, and we hope to do more with you guys. And thank you to our lovely speakers for joining us this afternoon here in this beautiful space. And also a big thank you to Joanna, who pushed me to do this. So thanks for organizing and showing up today. Um, and now, you, everyone needs to know. Sorry, I could hear my, oh, I'm okay now. So many of you know WOD, but I did see a lot of new names on the list, and so I'll do a quick introduction. If I could just share the screen.
Next one along. Next one along. The one with the arrow. By the right.
Oh, there, sorry.
And click on the PDF below.
Right. So just a quick brief about what WOD is, where we are and where we are heading. So I started WOD in 2018 with a personal agenda of bringing women together to learn and to grow. I've worked as a designer across the globe and met some incredible women during this journey. So I just wanted to bring them all together on a platform and to get to meet more people. So it was a very personal agenda, which just kept growing. And it turned out that more people needed it, more women needed it, because as women, we didn't go out and network as much. And that's where we lost on our learning and growth. The other thing that I realized while starting WOD is that there is so much knowledge out there. There are companies like manufacturers like Herman Miller, Steelcase, who run a lot of white papers, even companies like do a lot of research, but at times it doesn't percolate down to the industry, and not many of us get to know the results of those research. So I wanted to use this platform also to share knowledge like we're doing today. So it started as a personal agenda, but turned out to be, a connecting platform for about 2,000 plus members today from UK, US, Europe, and we also have a chapter in India now. Basically, to bring women together, to empower women by networking, learning together. So, just to clarify, WOD is not about feminism, a platform where just women get together. And I get asked this question every other day, where just yesterday someone wrote to me saying, can I attend this event, even though I'm not a female? And I'm like, so you see, we've got our speakers who are male members supporting. So it's just wanted to clarify that we are an open industry professional network, right? So please welcome, anyone's welcome to join. Up until now, we've been well supported by the industry, and what we've been doing till 2019 is doing a lot of learning events, which are live events, and many manufacturers host us in their beautiful showrooms, or architectural firms like this one. And we do various topics. We do discussions like we're doing today. We do speaker events, all related to workplace design. But we also do a lot of fun parties, networking events, workshops. We attend, or rather tie up with a lot of festivals like the Clerkenwell Design Week, London Design Festival. We did the Valencia show last year, Barcelona Design Museum. So had a good journey for 2 years. And then, of course, came lockdown. And we, just like everyone else, moved to hybrid and digital events. Hopefully, come July, we will be back to more live events. But then came a time last year when we were all stuck at home, and we thought we needed more than just these events where we meet once in 2 months. We needed to interact more and learn more. And that's when we set up the digital community, which is an app-based digital platform for our members. It's free for architects and designers to join, a small fee for others to come and join us, but it gives you access to the global community, make contacts, showcase your work, raise your profile. So that's where we are, guys. I would just quickly end by saying, come join us, visit our website to know more, and be a part of this global network. So thank you, and moving on to the event today. The workplace, targeting carbon zero, a very important topic, a conversation that myself and Georgia planned last year to have in Milan.
Yes, that's right.
Booked our flights, booked our hotels.
Gosh.
Didn't happen.
No, I know. It seems like a lifetime ago.
It is,
doesn't
isn't it? And
Yeah.
then of course Joanna came into the picture, and now we have a proper group for sustainability, and we're trying to gather more people to get into this conversation. So Joanna is moderating this event today. I'm going to just sit on the side, hiding away, not trying to act that I'm an expert at this. But if you guys have any questions, please drop that in the chat box and I can give it to the experts at the end to answer. A quick introduction to our panel today. Jamie here is the sales director at Bureau with a particular focus on developing environmentally driven proposals for their clients. And he's very passionate about working on this with his manufacturing partner. So I'm sure you'll bring a lot to the table today, Jamie. Thank you for joining us. Georgia is an environmental engineer with about 20 years plus experience as a sustainability professional. I've spent too much time introducing Georgia because she's very well known in the furnishing industry, and particularly well known now that she's taken the UK government to court.
Yeah. Not necessarily known for the right reasons, being a bit of a troublemaker.
I'd say that's for
Someone
good
needs to
reasons.
So which we will briefly touch upon during our session today. Kate, who is the principal at Perkins & Rowe and was supposed to be a part of this panel, is unable to join us today, but her lovely colleague, Adam, who's also a principal at Perkins & Rowe. And Adam has built his career in the commercial workplace industry, working at various scales and in a range of locations around the world. He's driving his passion of designing sustainable workspaces by championing their net zero pledge, which we would again touching upon briefly today. And our moderator for today is Joanna Knight, who is the WOD Sustainability Manager and a marketing consultant in our industry. So over to you, Joanna.
Thanks, Harsha. Well, this is a real honour to be here today. And thanks everyone for joining us. Just very briefly, I started working in the furniture industry, probably, dare I say it, approaching 40 years ago. And during the early 2000s in particular, I was very involved in reuse and recycling, and we developed some really interesting initiatives. I had a career break for about 5 years recently and came back to it about a year ago and was absolutely astonished that we haven't really moved on. And I started doing more research and journalism into this sector, and then joined up with Harsha. And it's exciting because things are there are green shoots. Things are starting to change, as I see it anyway. But anyway, less about me. Moving on to you, Adam. One of the things that really fired up us starting this seminar was the fact that Perkins & Will have introduced their Carbon Zero Now initiative. Perhaps you could give us a quick overview, and also what does this mean in terms of your supply chain?
Sure. Okay.
Do you want me to start
would,
right away?
please.
Yeah.
So thanks very much for inviting us along, and welcome to Perkins & Will. It's great to meet people in real life.
Yeah.
Doing it more now at the moment, which is great. So I'll share a few slides in terms of our pledge. We launched our pledge back in October of 2020, which really was building on a lot of years of work of Perkins & Will globally in terms of looking at sustainable architecture, and also a similar pledge that we have within our architectural department here at Perkins & Will. And so we broke it down into a series of goals with the ultimate target of being able to ensure that all of our interiors projects were designed to be embedded net zero carbon by 2030. So it was a kind of almost 10-year plan when we launched it last year. 9 years now, and time's running out. Time is running out for us on our pledge, and time running out for us globally in terms of making a difference. So although we have 9 years to go, it's not going to be easy to achieve that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. A lot of work that we can do, but a lot of work that's actually outside of our control in terms of industry change, systemic change. And so that's where a big focus of our time is. So we're aiming for this 2030 target. If we get there quicker, that's amazing. But there's a lot of work to do. It was really important to us, if you could move on to the next slide, Harsha, it's really important to us to kind of break that down, into kind of series of reportable and achievable milestones. So we haven't just said by 2030 we'll be doing this, and we haven't just said we're going to, equally we haven't just made a bunch of kind of promises. We've broken it down into kind of really achievable targets that we need to get to, from detailed stuff such as doing life cycle analysis of all of our projects so that we understand where the carbon is on projects and where we need to focus in terms of getting the highest benefits initially, through to really thinking about a much more circular design across all of our projects, pushing the industry to focus more on EPDs, and a series of kind of supplier engagement pieces, focusing on recyclable content, a series of milestones that we feel we're going to need to get to in order to hit that 2030 target. And one of the, if you could go on to the next slide, please. One of the kind of really important elements to us is around transparency. You know, we feel there's lots of people doing really fantastic work in terms of sustainable architecture, sustainable interiors, but there's also lots of people making a bunch of promises. And so for us, it was important that we were really transparent with the promises that we're making. So just a few weeks ago, we gave our 6-month report on our progress, and we'll be doing that every 6 months to say, these are the things that we've done well, but these are the things that we failed on, or these are the things that we're finding it really hard to make progress on. And for us, it's really important that we're transparent in our progress. You know, and I would hold my hands up and say, we haven't achieved all the things that we would hope to achieve by this point. We've done some good work, but there's been some things that we haven't achieved. And so we need to really focus on that and work hard to make sure that when we come to our 6-month review in October of this year, we've achieved everything that we set out to achieve. So that's our pledge. One big element of that, which we did actually subsequent to our pledge, was to think about how we can engage better with the supply chain and to give our design teams here and also across other studios that we have globally the right tools in order to make really clear and smart decisions on the materials and the products that we use. And there's so much information floating around the industry on sustainable products, you know, and I think that as a designer, you can get kind of snow blinded by all of the information that's out there. So we wanted to say, this is what's important to us, and to measure products, measure materials, and what we felt was important. We have a global transparency database already, which measures products in terms of their health. And this is a separate database that looks at sustainability. It also looks at diversity and inclusion. It looks at where products are made. There's a number of other elements that we score products on, but the core of it is sustainability. So suppliers can go onto our website. They can complete information in relation to their products or their materials. We'll then score that. Our sustainability team will then score that in relation to what we think is important. Materials will get a score from 1 to 5. And that gives our designers the ability to search that database and score materials that we feel are really beneficial to the industry. And there will become a point where certain products that don't meet our criteria won't be specified. So we're using this as a tool to help our designers specify the right materials, but also to help our suppliers understand what we think is important in order for them to kind of keep developing new products that we think are going to be the right products for the future.
Is this an open access database?
It's only the front end is open, the back end is just for us. So any supplier or manufacturer can enter their information.
Yeah.
At the moment, only Perkins and Will people can use it as a resource.
Are you planning to open it as a resource?
There is our transparency website is an open resource. Anyone can go onto perkinsandwilltransparency.com and use that to search healthy materials.
Okay.
There is an opportunity to move the Now database to be open source. There's some complications that come with that in terms of how you validate some of the information, but we feel that there isn't at the moment a kind of global database for sustainable interior materials. It's only one that isn't validated in a way that we feel could be accredited. So it is something we'd like to look at in the future. What we need, more importantly, is for people to be on it. So we want all the suppliers to come to us, to join the database. The more people we get on there, the more chance we have of them making it something that's feasible to go at a wider scale. So please, you know, if you're listening and you're a supplier, get in touch, join the process.
Yeah, that's important. That's a starting point, isn't it?
So just to wrap up, you know, I mentioned at the beginning that there's a lot of work that we can do as designers and architects to make change. but actually the bigger changes can be made from an industry and systemic change where we all have to work together. And many of the things we haven't achieved are because there's been blockers in the way in terms of industry, whether it's the ability to reuse furniture, whether it's a waste that comes from flooring materials that isn't then recycled in the right way, whether it's barriers to clients' expectations, whether it's financial barriers that we're still working through. There's a series of things that we need to do to change the industry. And so our team who are focused on this are looking at our own internal design processes, but we're also looking at how we can work with the wider supplier, contractor, client, consultant community, developer community to make bigger change. And actually, that's where the big jumps are going to be made. And so, we're focusing as much on what we can do as to what we can do to help change within the industry. So that's a super quick fly through. I think that's the last slide.
I think so.
Thanks,
Where we are.
Adam. I think it's a good point to jump in actually and ask Georgia. You work with developers and end users and designers and all wanting to achieve or working with them to achieve net zero.
Yeah.
But who's driving it? Where's it coming from? Or is this just a fad that we're suddenly all talking about sustainability?
Well, I think up until now, sustainability has been treated like a trend and like a kind of marketing exercise. So look at us, look how green we are. And then that tends towards just being about one or two token projects where the client is willing to pay a lot of money, whoever the client is in the chain. And then, there's a case of don't look at the 99% of other stuff we're doing, just this stuff. So that's the way that it's been treated in the past. But now I'm so pleased to see growing pressure in industry to really materially address carbon emissions. And that's coming from, it's coming from the Paris Agreement, which the process began in 2015. So you can see, it's a long time since the Paris Agreement was established, and it's been a long time that the UK has been a signatory to that. And actually, it's been a long time since the UK government has set the net zero by 2050 target, but we've still seen carbon emissions going up as quickly as ever. And so what we're seeing now is, I think, particularly in the UK with COP26 just around the corner, and then with actions, I'm an environmental professional, I'm MD of a sustainability consultancy, but I'm also quite out of the closet environmental activist as well. And I've recently taken the UK government to the High Court for a judicial review of their carbon emissions regulations, which are, on the one hand, ministers are out there talking about climate ambition and talking about great targets on carbon. But on the other hand, behind closed doors, in writing these policies and regulations, they are simply not taking strong enough action in order to limit CO2 emissions. And the problem with that is that leaves industry with very mixed signals. So on the one hand, we're saying, we want net zero, but then the regulation and the fiscal incentives and the drivers aren't there. So industry is being asked really voluntarily to do the right thing and potentially limit their own profit margins in order to do the right thing. That shouldn't be the case. And I think we're now starting to see, with activism, with a lot of pressure and exposure of these sorts of things going on at a high level in government, and exposure of things like investment in fossil fuels from banks and those organisations starting to be held accountable by the public for those decisions. That is really driving, I think, more meaningful examination within responsible organisations, or certainly organisations with a public profile, to start saying, right, we've got to start looking at our exposure. And essentially, it's a risk management process for a lot of organisations to say, regulation is going to come. It's not there yet, but it's coming. There's a direction of travel.
It has to come, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're going to be exposed to ever increasing scrutiny by our customers, by our clients, by the public. There's a growing movement here, and I think businesses, so far most businesses have been paying lip service to this. But my message to everybody, and I would say that because I'm a sustainability consultant, but my message is get on board and do it early. Understand the issues and decide what direction you're going to take now, before you're dragged along behind everybody else, and forced into action. And there are good ways of doing good business and doing the right thing, but you've got to examine it and not just jump on the bandwagon.
Absolutely. Jamie, we haven't come to you yet. You're very much at the sharp end, being sort of from working with, well, on both sides of the fence, you're working with designers, you're working with end users, but in particular end users. What's your view on the Carbon Zero Now initiative? Is it achievable, or is this just a dream of this wonderful practice that they want to achieve? And do you feel it's something that you guys can start working towards?
I tend to both of your comments, in the sense that obviously from a furniture perspective, there's this very complex supply chains that go behind that, and then the complexity that comes with that, and understanding their own carbon emissions and so on. So we are, as a business, putting the foundations in place to become carbon neutral, and we've got our own focus group which we've put together to start that process. We're already underway with our IT and furniture reclamation piece that we do as part of our Moves division, which is underpinned by our goal to try and nothing to landfill is ultimately our goal, and trying to reduce waste, which is clearly a big issue in our industry. But it's that process of understanding what, from a supply chain perspective, where the outputs are from a carbon perspective, to then offset that throughout the various initiatives that are available to us, which we're looking into in earnest at the moment. So we're on that journey, very much like Perkins and Well, and we set ourselves a very similar goal in terms of where we want to be. But it's and we're not alone. There has been some really good silver linings from the pandemic that has, I think, really focused the mind, and we're hearing that from our customers, and we're hearing that from very large organisations that we work with. So there are the green shoots appearing, which is really encouraging. It's maybe not just a fad anymore now. I think people are really taking it seriously.
I think you're right. It can't be a fad, let's face it.
No.
You've brought me nicely onto, because you brought up waste, and it's one of my passions, and that the UK government has just launched a consultation paper on the waste prevention programme for England. There is a chapter specifically on furniture, and there is reference to extended producer responsibility. But the consultation is going on until 2025, I believe. And isn't this really just kicking this can down the road? Can I sort of throw that at you, Georgia? Because I know you feel as strongly as I do about the whole waste. We can't have waste.
Yeah, well, the problem that we have, and alluding to what both of you have said, is there's a systematic problem here, which is that virgin materials and waste disposal are cheaper than the labour and the processes and the logistics of reuse and remanufacture and recycling. If that weren't the case, we would naturally already be doing it, and people would naturally have systems in place to remanufacture, reuse, and keep materials in the economy. And so it's kind of going back to what I was originally talking about we are being asked voluntarily as industry to hit our own profit margins in order to do the right thing, because the economics and the regulations that are currently in place, and through decades of poor waste management regulation, we have ended up in a situation where it's Perspex screens is a great example. The pandemic hits and suddenly everybody's buying tons and tons of plastic. Where is that going to go? Straight in the bin. But it's cheaper to do that than it is to actually think about using other materials. So we need a fundamental change in the way that what the economics of waste and the economics of virgin materials works, because that is the only thing that's genuinely going to drive the circular economy. And there's lots that organisations can do about designing furniture for circularity, so that when those regulations hit, the product in the market doesn't then become, it can only be disposed of. It is set up for circularity, but it will take some time for that to come in. But I do think that what all organisations that care about these issues should be doing is lobbying hard, because there are a lot of negative forces lobbying for things to stay the same. We need an equal and opposite, or greater and opposite force of people who care about these issues, completing these consultations, lobbying their MPs, lobbying government, working with their trade associations, asking organisations like REBA, RICS, CIOB, you know, all of these, what are you doing to put in place the sorts of regulations and tax benefits and so on that are needed to get this going, because we can no longer be asking industry to do this voluntarily.
Sure.
You know, it's so that I think is the most important thing that
But it has a
can
cost,
do.
as you're saying. So unless
Yeah.
they lobby and highlight what it costs, how can they be helped?
Yeah, well, I think there are some fundamental things that customers can do as well. So I'm working, so I feel like I'm taking over this discussion. I will stop talking in a moment. I will. You know, I work with developers, with investors, with asset managers and corporate occupiers, developing their sustainability strategies and developing their sustainable design briefs. So I'm trying to educate those people within the chain that if they mandate certain behaviour, the supply chain can then get the strong signal to invest in this, that there's good business to be done. And it does have to come from that top level, because I feel everybody in the chain is looking up the chain and says, I will do this when the people above me ask for it. So we need to get that top layer really understanding the influence that they have on their supply chains. And by putting people on preferred bidder lists, you know, investing and supporting their supply chains through this change, they can have such a massive impact on these things.
Adam, is that part of your initiative in terms of looking also at waste reduction, not just new products?
Yeah, I mean, everything you said is like, there's so much to sort of talk about. I mean, waste is a big problem, right? Of course, but it's not just a product; it's the material, it's the packing is for me a big problem as well. Like, you know, you talk about furniture, you go to a big project. You know, we do hundreds of thousands of square foot projects. You go to a project and the furniture's going in. The amount of cardboard and plastic that's coming out of the building is embarrassing, frankly. You know, the product itself might last for 10 years, fine, but that cardboard is, you know, going only in one place. It might be going to recycling, but you know, recycling is bad. Like, we have to admit that recycling is bad. When I was at school, we were taught to recycle, right? I teach my kids to recycle, but recycling is actually bad. It's like the last thing. It's not the first thing. So just saying stuff is going to be recycled is not acceptable anymore. And lots of things are recycled in a really low grade way as well. To burning stuff, it's not good. It might not go into landfill, but it's not good. So packaging, I think, is a problem. We've all been working at home for a year, getting loads of Amazon deliveries, which, you know, it's highlighted it for me personally. But I mean, I think fundamentally products are being designed to be circular, but the market isn't there for them to be twisted or turned in a new way. So there's lots of great furniture. If you take furniture as an example, furniture is important because it's a kind of mature section of the industry. It's a complex section of the industry, and it's a lot of furniture in buildings. And so there's a lot of embedded carbon in furniture. It's one of the highest scorers. Task furniture is one of the highest scorers when we do a life cycle analysis on an office project. And there's lots of good things being done in furniture, but there's lots of product designers designing really good circular furniture, but manufacturers and agents and dealers aren't turning it. There's no mechanism for that to then have a second life and a third life. So, you know, until manufacturers and dealers and clients accept that we have to start buying reconditioned furniture, all of that great product design is going to be wasted, even when it matures and that product is available to be reused, you know, in 5, 6, 7 years time. There needs to be a market in place for that to happen. I mean, I talk about Patagonia a lot, because, you know, different industry, but Patagonia are in my mind an amazing brand from a sustainability perspective, not just because of their sustainable product, that they do things and the way they communicate is really powerful. You know, you can go into a Patagonia store now and they'll sell secondhand apparel next to new apparel. And that needs to happen in furniture. I need to go to the Herman Miller showroom and I need to look at lovely new furniture, but I need to see some reconditioned furniture that I can also buy from them. And until Herman Miller take that step, there's not going to be big chains. And it's not just Herman Miller, lots of large scale manufacturers. They need to accept that they need to be part of the reconditioned furniture market. Because at the moment it's being done by a series of kind of like tertiary, smaller organizations who are doing really great work, but they're kind of pushing water up a hill until the big manufacturers get on board. And I get it, because, you know, ostentatiously there's not as much profit in secondhand furniture as there is in new furniture, And making new furniture is great because people work in factories, it's socially sustainable. There's great things about making new product that we also have to concentrate on. But all of this furniture lasts 15 years, and it gets used for 5 years, and it's just not acceptable.
At best.
So I think I don't want to pick on furniture because there's lots of other parts of our industry that need focus from an embedded energy perspective. But the furniture industry is such an interesting and mature industry, and it's such a connected industry. There's a lot much more better work that can be done. So I think we need those big players to get on board, and we've told them that. We've told all of these guys this, so it's just not new to them. The other thing I just talk about sort of financially is at the moment it's still kind of cheaper from an embedded energy perspective to offset than it is to build efficiently. We use a £95 a ton offset cost when we're looking at life cycle assessments of carbon. So our clients, if we've got 1,000 tons of carbon in the building, we use that as a cost to offset, which gives you a relatively good sort of London high quality offset cost. But when we do the calculations and we look at more sustainable design solutions, it generally costs more than that. So as a client, I can build a bad building, offset that carbon, and it would be cheaper to me than building a good building still. And until carbon offset prices go up, or until the industry matures so that sustainable building materials and techniques come down in price, then that's always going to happen, right? So we need more people to choose those materials. We need more manufacturers to invest in those materials. We need more economies of scale in that area in order for it to become too expensive to offset. And that's when clients and end users will go down that route from a commercial perspective as opposed to just from a sustainability perspective.
There's a great campaign called the Zero Carbon Campaign, which I'd advise everybody to take a look at, which is campaigning for a universal carbon tax, because the way that regulation is working at the moment is so complex. But actually, if we simply look at virgin materials versus high quality reused materials, there's inherent carbon emissions associated with that. One would naturally be cheaper than the other. And then you're not asking people to care about carbon, you're asking them to continue caring about money and making the right investment decision for what's profitable. And then clients would be demanding secondhand furniture because it would be cheaper and just as good quality as the original stuff. You can generate a market that way.
I mean, Jamie, are you finding this with your customers? Do you find that, traditionally, second-hand furniture is seen as some sort of dodgy outfit underneath the railway arches, and has that sort of poor relations. Are you finding the opportunities to reuse and look at reuse? I think reuse is better than second-hand.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I don't really care about this recondition. Reuse is like it's
Make it sound
like
interesting.
maybe it needs to be rebranded. I don't know, but
Well, I mean, it does come down to people's attitudes though, and attitudes are changing towards the whole subject matter. And some of our larger clients who have very ambitious goals to become net zero themselves are really strongly looking at the whole concept of reuse. Some of them have got very large portfolios of product full of furniture. Why don't we even think about doing that in the first place? I was talking earlier about a customer that we know very well who'd gone through a process of actually taking all the redundant furniture, say all of it, a lot of the redundant furniture, some of it was in storage, some of it was on site, and taking it away and upcycled, refurbished the furniture, reupholstered it, and put it back into their offices and so on. And so there is definitely that is definitely happening now, and we've got customers who are actively asking us to look at the second-hand market. Our moves division, as I mentioned before, has an IT and furniture reclamation piece, furniture reclamation there to prevent product going to landfill, and there is a tertiary market for second-hand furniture. A lot of people talk about sending product to charities and so on. It's a little bit opaque, whereas we've partnered with organisations there that definitely take that a lot more seriously. And there's a sort of chain of custody, if you want, attached to those products and where they end up. So we're starting to already see that, and I say starting. It really has been quite evident in the last 6 months, where I think just really this
people
whole
have
movement
realised
has really
it's dead.
has really exploded.
Yeah.
I think that because we talking to big occupiers about this all the time. You need big occupiers to do it. Like we're working with some we're working with some good brands who are considering it, and like if they can do it, why can't I do it? And so you need that peer pressure, which is important.
Yeah.
I think also like most people who go to the office wouldn't know that it's secondhand or reconditioned, right? And that's a big thing. It's like this chair is secondhand. I didn't realise. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the starting point for us. Is like people shouldn't even really be able to tell. That's important.
Do you think they would want to know it was secondhand now?
Yeah, I think so. I think people are much more receptive to that now in most organisations. Different sectors have different approaches, absolutely. But for me, it's much more about this idea of like managing a resource in terms of circular management of a resource. So the way that I describe it is like every building that we build now is basically like a B&Q for the next project, right? And so it's the idea of buildings as material banks. We're not building buildings which just have this linear use anymore. It's like every time we look at an interior, we're thinking, okay, when this client is finished with it, what happens? Where does it go? And, how can we take that material? How can we reuse it in a really low friction way for another product or another project or another use? So, and if you think about looking around the city of London here, how much stuff there is in buildings that have just been designed to be very linear. Someone described it to me as this idea of like, we used to always, we've mined the natural world for thousands of years, right? Now it's time to mine the urban world. So like urban mining is like all of this stuff that's around us is enough stuff. If we had the design principles and if we had the industry to support that use, we probably would never need to even look outside the M25 to do projects within London. But
it doesn't need to be considered in its original use, does it? I mean,
no, there's lots of other opportunities, and I think the other thing for me is, and I'm a designer. I've been doing this 20 years. We like beautiful things, right? And so for me, it's this idea that we talk about here at Perkins Will of like a new beautiful. So what is beautiful? It's not about chairs that cost 20 grand and leather wall panels and all this beautiful stuff that we like and we enjoy specifying and designing. That's fantastic, but actually when we look at a building or an interior now, we need to look at a different layer of what is beautiful about that. And if it's furniture which is secondhand but it's been done in an interesting way and supported by some other design movements, then that's also great. So I think as designers we need to really reconsider what we feel is beautiful in terms of interior. We've used so much stuff for a long time. There's lots of resources that we use. So I feel we have to step back from that now.
Definitely. There's so many amazing buildings in London that are great examples of reuse. Let's be honest. Historical buildings every year.
But I love this terminology, new beautiful. That's what we all need to get onto that, isn't it?
And urban mining, I like that. Oh, claim them, claim them.
I go back to fashion a lot just because I think that fashion with construction is fashion, food, and construction big travel as well. But the fashion industry has really started to embrace a new aesthetic when it comes to reuse materials. Obviously, the secondhand apparel market is starting to kind of develop a little bit more. People, it's a different aesthetic, right? But it's also, but it's still interesting. So,
it's stories as well, isn't it? Because it's not just about the look; it's about the meaning behind the thing. And I think that's so important when you're building a brand and building customer loyalty. Is also getting that feel-good factor from what you've got. That it's not just pretty, but it's got a story and a history.
And that's what consumers. That's what consumers want now. That's what private consumers want, but that's what businesses want. They want. Everyone talks about the bullshit phrase of authenticity, like I want it to be authentic. No one knows what that really means, right? But authenticity is like there's something there which has a deeper meaning to it. And so if you're specifying products and materials that have a narrative to them that have come from somewhere, that's much more authentic than maybe more two-dimensional design narratives. So I think businesses, consumers want it, but businesses want it as well now.
Yeah, I think that word authenticity is really nice because I think, with all of the ESG work that I do with companies, I tell them, we abandon greenwash. Like that's the old world, is trying to make things look green. Now it's about the true story, about there are reasons why business is done the way it's done. Let's not pretend that we're 100% green because that isn't possible. True. Let's look at what the genuine blockers are. Let's be honest about what can and can't be done in today's system and what needs to be done in order for it to change, and bring people together to make that systematic change change happen. And one of the things about construction that you mentioned, and particularly this urban mining, we have to look at the construction process, because the design and construction process is usually so compressed and so difficult to drive these sorts of innovations. Like, so you go into a building that's full of furniture, fixtures, fittings. You've got to mobilize that site. You've got to get it clear, ready for the refurbishment works. Where does this stuff go? Who's paying for that time? Who's planning those works? Is the contractor incentivized to save this stuff, to treat it carefully for the logistics? All of those things need thinking through. And I think it isn't just about the design process. It's got to be about that practical. Are the contractors on board with it? Is it part of their contract? Are they incentivized towards doing it? And do we really need to look at the construction economics and the construction program and brief and upskilling the chain to support that? Because I don't think we are.
No, we're not. But there are. So I think we're going to move to much more off-site construction, which is going to help. So buildings will be designed and built in a factory rather than on site, and that's going to be much safer. It's going to be much more inclusive. It's going to reduce waste a lot. That's great. But I think at the moment there's things that you can do. So if as a designer you're doing a project which has a strip out component to it, because sometimes we're starting from white boxes, sometimes we're starting from existing. If you're doing a strip out, put in the contractor has to do a pre-demolition audit. It's a really simple thing. Contractor has to do an audit of everything that's in that building and show where it could go that avoids landfill. It's a really simple thing.
Or incineration.
Or incineration. Yeah. And so it's really a simple thing. You get it back from the contractor and you can say, right, this is going to go to these places before we start the demolition. Easy thing to do, easy win, making sure that you avoid stuff going to bad places. So things like that can be done now, and most of the main contractors in the European market are perfectly able to do that type of thing. And there's lots of suppliers who will take that stuff now and send it to better places. So there are easy things that can be done, but there's still lots of big change that needs to happen in terms of the industry to try and iron out all of those kinks that happen all the way along from architectural appointment to the kind of closing party. There's so many things that still can be improved.
But can I flag up, perhaps Jamie, you might be good at answering this one. You talked about, Georgia, the financial implications, and the companies can't be expected to cut their own throat. And the furniture market, okay, not so much on the retail domestic side, but certainly on the contract and office side, have been through a really hard time over the last year and a half. Are we expecting people to do all of this? Because there is a cost associated to what was being discussed. So surely there has to be some sort of fiscal change as well. I mean, what's your view? Are the manufacturers really feeling the pain, or are they happy to start embracing this? Or what about end users? Are they putting their hand in their pocket?
I think that there's a genuine. I mean, again, this whole experience we've had over the last year has had loads of positive outcomes, and we're definitely, from my perspective, speaking to the manufacturers, we've recently undertaken a sustainability presentation where we talk around a number of different areas within trying to be sustainable, and mainly around sustainable procurement, because obviously we recognise the fact that virgin materials are a finite resource. There's going to be a lot more pressure as our industry continues to grow, and we've talked around circularity and so on. And having spoken to manufacturers around that, they're all really embracing it. They're all, when I say all of them, there's definitely an appetite there. Some are being a lot more proactive than others. But I think there's maybe not necessarily a bit the elephant in the room is maybe this whole reuse piece. How having a mechanism such as one of these larger manufacturers in place for the take back schemes that we hear about. How do they employ that? What is the actual mechanism process for when that product comes to end of its life? So we are talking to customers around asset tagging and managing their assets more effectively, so they can understand when products coming to the end of its life, warrantable life, I suppose, and whether it's something that's easily extended by replacing, reupholstering a seat pad or replacing a small component within that chair. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot more organizations of manufacturers seeing a lot more rhetoric around that and getting their heads around the circularity piece, designing modular furniture that's easily easily replaced, or parts easily replaced, or recycled, or upgraded to ensure that that piece of furniture life is extended. And that's part of the issue. I think a lot of people think, oh, reuse furniture. Oh, you know, I know customers who've still got desks that have had for the last 20 years. There's no intention of changing them. They're absolutely functional and they do exactly what they want. I think when we're looking at new schemes, new schemes, I think we're definitely going to start having a conversation more readily around a blend of both reuse, product reuse and new, with the right sustainability credentials attached to it.
There's a really good report. I don't know if you've seen it, called Rearranging the Furniture. That was written a few years ago, and that gives I think like a 10-point plan about all the things we need in place in order to get really good systems of furniture design, manufacture, logistics, reuse, and all of those things. And that talks about tagging, you know, re-warranty centres as well, so that once a material has been remanufactured, then it attracts a new warranty, and all those really important things that can't be ignored. But that hasn't happened in those years since that report was written, and it's full of amazing suggestions. So, you know, I suppose I asked the industry a sort of open question about what does need to change in order for those recommendations to move forwards. Because if those things could happen, if they were attractive, they would be happening, but they're not.
Yeah, I think big. I mean, I don't want to beat up furniture manufacturers because they do a great job.
We love you, furniture manufacturers.
Big furniture manufacturers are, you know, they're spending a lot of money designing sustainable products, but they're not spending a lot of money designing the system for sustainable products to have a second life. And like, they have to accept they're going to have to sell second-hand product if they're designing products to have a second life. You know, so they got to be, if they're making it, they got to be part of the party at the end. But I think the procurement thing but this stands for other things. So raised access floor, as an example. Raised access floor is one of the biggest contributors to embedded carbon in a building, because these are big slabs of concrete and timber and metal. There's a great second-hand market for raised access floor. So as designers, if you need to specify raised access floors, go second-hand first. It's a really maturing market. Think how many millions of square foot of raised access floor you could see from this room. They last forever. They hardly ever get beaten up. So, you know, there's certainly other products, easy wins. I think procurement of furniture, you know, sort of extended producer responsibility is a really interesting concept for me. And you know, I don't know where it is at the moment. Sort of, you guys know a bit more about it than me, but I think as an ethos is really important. And so for us, it's linked to kind of the financial aspect of the project. You know, there will be a movement for projects to be reported from a life cycle perspective rather than a capital perspective. And, you know, we're certainly talking to more and more occupiers who need to plan their estates from a life cycle perspective, because, you know, when we're doing projects, you know, tens of millions of pounds of projects, people are really talking about the capital cost of that project. But we need to switch that conversation to the kind of life cycle cost of that project financially and from a carbon perspective. And so in terms of procurement, you know, leasing elements of a building will become more and more done. I think furniture, carpets you can lease now, it's a bunch of different things. One of the things that we're pushing more now is buyback incentives when it comes to procuring furniture. So we're saying to furniture dealers or manufacturers, you're going to get the order for the furniture, but in 7 years or 10 years, whatever the lease is, you need to buy back that furniture from our client for a fixed price. It's not easy to get to. There's still a lot of kind of difficulty to have that sort of thing contractually obliged. But the idea is, like, if I'm going to sell you £1 million worth of furniture and I have to buy it back from you for 100 grand in 10 years time, I'm only going to sell you furniture which has a value to me in 10 years time, right? And so otherwise I've just lost 100 grand if all that furniture goes back to landfill at that time, or if it all goes to charity. You know, there's no value to me as part of that supply chain. So as you start to bring buyback in, then you have dealers and manufacturers having to understand that asset has to have a further value, second life, financial value, and you start to just choose products which have that kind of value to them.
Has big accounting implications, though, doesn't it?
There is, because it's written off over the period of, you know, so you know, financially it's complex, but and so I'm not, you know, I can make it sound really easy by saying you just buy it back in for 10 years. There's from both parties, there's complications there from how you write off the asset and all those types of things. But the idea is that, you know, when I sell you something, I'm going to have it back, and there's a value in that asset. And so as a client, I might be able to buy more expensive furniture because I know that at some point I'm going to get a bit of money back for it.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of different avenues that you can go down, many of which kind of hit a dead end. But the idea that the responsibility of that product sits with the person that made it rather than the person that bought it is a kind of mindset shift that's going to have to be made at some point.
And then they are invested in longevity, in repairability.
So when they're designing new products,
And marketing it.
Yeah.
And finding a way that they can make money out of it.
Yes. Yeah. There's got to be something in it. Yeah. For everyone in the chain.
Maybe now would be a good time to ask. I'd love other people to join in this conversation. So
I'll be
Harsha,
looking at the comments, and there are more comments than questions actually.
Oh, okay.
I love the way people are discussing and, you know, sharing their own ideas and what problems they go through as manufacturers, which is great to hear. There's one question which came from Morag, if I'm pronouncing that right. What do you guys think about renting furniture rather than buying furniture? You know, is there more scope of doing that? If people don't want to go through the whole reconditioned or remanufactured furniture. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think your clients would get on board with renting furniture?
Well, I think, you know, the leasing economy or the renting economy, you know, like car sharing, you know, why have a lump of metal outside your house in London that you use one day a month? You know, clothes, I think sharing clothes, leasing clothes is starting to be more developed now. Cycling, there's lots of different industries where, you know, kind of the sharing economy is part of it. And, you know, furniture leasing has been around for a long time. You know, I don't know that it's ever really
hasn't really taken off.
No, it's had a certain kind of niche market, I guess. We are certainly sort of asking manufacturers about the opportunities for that and seeing if it makes sense to clients. For a lot of clients, it depends how they financially report as to whether there are actually benefits to that or not.
Sure.
You know, for some clients, it's more beneficial financially just to buy it. I think it's a market that will be mature. But the way I think of it is like this chair can go anywhere, right? It doesn't have to just be. It's not just one person that has that chair forever. You have to think about that chair as an asset that can move around, whether it moves around within a client's portfolio or multiple clients' portfolios. If you can asset tag that chair and you can re-warrant it, it can be managed as a resource. You know, and that applies to everything in a building. It's like how we manage the materials as material banks, how we manage products and materials and items within construction. We have to think about it as a flow of things rather than just a use of things.
Sure.
But leasing sort of like as a pros and cons, I'm not an expert on that.
It does already exist. There are organisations, large furniture manufacturers who offer furniture as a service, FAS. It's really captured our imagination, I suppose, because, you know, there is, having spoken to people as part of our sustainability presentation I mentioned before, and it really, you know, it does capture quite a few people's attention when we're talking about it, because they think, well, actually, this might be a solution for one of the clients I've been speaking to recently about this. And you can definitely see, especially where we've changed, or certainly the way of working has changed, and rightly so, to a much more flexible, agile style of working, less desks. But desks are still needed, high adjustable desks. And of course, there's a price tag with a high adjustable desk. That might put people off initially. Whereas if there's a leasing model around what we would sort of say commodity items, task chairs, desks, pedestals if they're needed, they would be really good products within that sort of leasing category that would be potentially attractive to customers. But it doesn't stop there. There's still, you know, you can still upholster, reupholster loose furnishing if it's required. You know, there's definitely going to be an appetite for that. There already is. I think that we've been having from the presentation we've done. So, but I was thinking about reuse again. Is there's the people that, you know, my child and our children growing up in a world where, you know, we've got to think about them, and without sounding too profound, but there's also the people that, you know, young people at the moment who the environment's really important to them. And there's lots of evidence out there, lots of research that supports that. And of course, there's an organisation that they're potentially going to join as an employee that has a great CSR policy and can actually evidence that in terms of what they're doing, it's clearly going to be attractive. And of course, reuse of furniture in their offices and so on will definitely be part of creating a new employer brand for organisations and attracting and retaining staff, which is part of the reason why we work with businesses like Perkins and Will to create these amazing environments to attract and retain staff.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I feel like the rental model needs a really great promotion campaign, because to me it does, because it makes so much sense on so many levels. Like, if you're making something for rental, you want that to stay in the economy for as long as possible. You're going to want to make it robust, you're going to want to make standard parts for it, you're not going to want to make something that can't be taken apart using bespoke pieces that you can't get from anywhere. It just, that drives the circularity, it drives the longevity, and it drives the repairability and so on. So I feel like I'd love to see the industry really sell that as a concept.
I think you're absolutely right, except for the fact that it's such bad timing in many ways, because you've got the government announcing tax benefits from investment in including furniture as a capital investment. You've got the industry that has not got awash with cash at this moment in time, and
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, well, maybe you're right. Let's hope so. But it does need them to completely put the brakes on and think, how are we making this furniture? What are we making it for? Because at the moment it's still a very linear process, isn't it? And I know we're picking on furniture, but it can apply to furnishings in general.
Well, I think to sort of make it wider than furniture, there's loads of other things that you can move a mindset and reuse to. I think there's two challenges. Like, as a designer, we want to make beautiful spaces. We get paid so spaces don't all look the same. The problem with efficiency and component-driven design is like it all looks the same, right?
Yeah.
And that's efficient, but it's not going to win us projects, right? So as a designer, it's a reframing of how you design in terms of working in a really efficient way with materials, but also in a way that's special for a client. Because you talk about CSR policies attracting staff, but beautiful offices also attract staff. So as a challenge, I can make a really efficient, boring office, right? But how do we make it special and different for a client is the biggest challenge. But in terms of making it wider than furniture, another focus for us is meeting rooms, right? So businesses don't want fixed things anymore, right? Every business it needs adaptability, and adaptability in design is intrinsically circular. So these two things are great. I talk about it a lot. It's like there's a symbiotic relationship between circular design and what organizations want from their buildings, which is flexibility, adaptability, change, fluidity. So building rooms out of plasterboards is bad, right? Because plasterboard is actually really good recycle. It's really easy. It's easy to recycle plasterboard sheets, but you have to break it apart. You have to smash it with a hammer. So it's a really uncircular product, plasterboard walls. And every meeting room that you can see through these windows, pretty much all of them are built out of plasterboard, right? So if the client wants to make a change, you have to destroy it to make that change. And that's not circular. So if we can build rooms which are much more kind of adaptable in the future, can be moved around. A meeting room is an asset in the same way that a company car is an asset. Straight away you have a much more adaptable building, and you have a much more adaptable set of assets. And that meeting room could be sold to someone else in the future. Imagine selling this meeting room to someone. You couldn't really do it, right? You could sell this table, you could sell the TV or whatever.
I suppose the equivalent might be these hotels with pod bathrooms.
Yeah, well, it's prefabrication, and so, but then again, you get a product. How do you make it special for a client? That's the challenge of a designer. So we're looking at all of the different components within an interior and working out how we can push the circularity of that. We've got clients that are telling us now we don't want to build anything. Like, how can you do an interior for us? Well, we don't want to build anything because we know that our business is going to change fundamentally, and we don't want build stuff to get in the way of that. And that's great for us, because you could effectively then take everything out of that building, sell it again in 5 years' time. So I think in terms of moving away from furniture, it's looking at the whole of the interior from a circular perspective. Second-hand market for meeting rooms will be a big market in the future. Second-hand market, all of these different things. How can we build a staircase which can be taken apart easily, built for disassembly, as opposed to just welded into a building, and it's only ever going to come out if you cut it out and it goes into the steel to be recycled in quite an intensive way. So, all of these elements of the interior. How do we build joinery, which isn't bespokely built in and only has one life, and then come out and be used again? So we have to apply that thinking to every element of an interior.
It's fascinating, and as you say, it seems so logical, doesn't it? But perhaps only now. I mean, are you beginning to think that we might actually see the light?
Oh, I really hope so. I think, yeah, exactly. That's why we're here. And I do feel generally in society, in the press, maybe it's because of the circles that I move in, but I do feel that there is a change in sentiment now, and that actually fashion is, fast fashion is really starting to get a bit of an ickiness about it, and I think that comes through in interiors as well, and people are starting to apply slightly different values, and I think the last year as well has taught us that when things that we thought couldn't change can change overnight, and I think I do have hope that the last year has given us some flexibility in thinking about the way things are, and that actually if we do want things to change, they can, and things are not necessarily set in stone. Markets can change. I hope that people start to bring the emergency into the climate emergency and biodiversity emergency. There is, when you look at all of the statistics, all of the data, the IPCC report that came out a few years ago talking about 12 years till catastrophic tipping points, we're now significantly along that 12-year timeline. We now only have 10 years left on that timeline, and we're seeing a lot of these tipping points happen. We can no longer bury our heads in the sand, and I think it's much more than just navel gazing within your own organisation about what can our company do to polish this green halo a little bit. We need to take ourselves out of that thinking and look honestly at the systems around us and say, right, how can we use our expertise to fundamentally change the blockers that we're all facing that need to be changed in order to make a proper step change forwards? Because we're all struggling under the same burden of the way things are, and little pilot projects and little initiatives are not going to be enough to drive us forwards. If we could put all of our brains together, all the people who are on this call who are experts in their particular field, who understand and deal daily with the way things are, and say, actually, no, that's bullshit, excuse my French. If we need this industry to change, we've got to put together our combined experience and understanding to change these systems so that it enables us to do good business and do the right thing. And I really like initiatives like Letty, for example, who said, we don't have time for the building regulations to catch up with the climate emergency. We are going to put together all of our brains as professionals and grown-ups in this industry to say, what is the new design brief that we need in order to design a building aligned that's suitable for a net zero trajectory? They're not waiting for regulation to catch up. And so I would like from this a kind of clarion call to say, stop waiting to be dragged. Let's all step up and say, right, these problems exist. Yes, they do, but we can do something about it if we're honest about it, authentic, and actually start saying, come on, let's define a new system.
So that's almost the point, isn't it? Be positive with your negativity.
Yeah.
Tell us what, you need to shout about the problems. Why can't you as a business? I mean, I talked about, and you, maybe furniture manufacturers are rich, are poor, who knows? But the point is that if they really can't make that change, they need to make a noise about it.
Yeah, why can't they?
Exactly, and that's the problem. Is that we've spoken to furniture manufacturers, contractors. We do a lot of consultation with stakeholders to find out where the barriers are. We know where the barriers are, right? We just need to work together to and it's one firm, one project, one client can't change those barriers. So I think people need to stop talking about doing stuff. Like, don't sign up to an initiative, write your own goal for your company, write your own initiative, because signing up to kind of global initiatives, great, but actually write a manifesto for what you're going to achieve as your own company and try and achieve that. And if you haven't achieved it, tell people you haven't achieved it, because the reason for not achieving those things are the problems in the industry, right?
Yeah.
And if we're not transparent about what's not working, we're not going to change those elements which are getting in the way. I think it's really important to kind of like, now's not the time to say we're going to do stuff. Now's the time to just to do stuff.
Do stuff, yeah.
And I think that's and you know, and it's again way easier to say that than do it, but you know, it's much better to start with and fail in little ways than just to sort of talk about it.
Yeah.
Because you know, like time has run out really, you know, like effectively. So if Boris brought it forward by 10 years, I think our goal. Again, you know, easy
But
to say,
it's
hard
just
to achieve,
talk,
but
exactly,
it's
because that statement came out 2 days after I was in court with the Secretary of State for Bays, looking at their meeting minutes from government, where they knowingly put in place a policy that enabled a 20% increase in industrial CO2 over the next 10 years. They knowingly did that. They were advised by the civil service that this is not aligned with the net zero trajectory, and they went ahead with it anyway. 2 days later, Boris says we're increasing our carbon targets, you know, our ambition. But where are the policies to back this up? And the thing is that we have to hold our you know, I want everyone to become an environmental activist. I want everyone out on the street saying, don't just talk about targets, do it. You know, show us what is the plan, how are you going to do it? And you know, exactly as you say, for companies, don't talk about sustainability, get it all out on the table. Why haven't we been doing it? Because if it was easy or if it was profitable, we would already be doing it. So what are the blockers? And just be really authentic and open as well. You know, I started by asking you about your database as well. You know, it's really important that we don't use sustainability for everybody in all industries. We don't use sustainability as a kind of personal gain marketing tool, but that we open source everything, because we don't have time for everyone to individually make the same mistakes. We need to stand on each other's shoulders and progress each other in order to reach global sustainability as quickly as possible.
And that's why we're being really transparent with the work that we're doing, because you know we have big competitors and small competitors, right? You know, we know that everyone needs to, you know, it's not if everyone doesn't do it, it's not going to happen, right? You know, like it's like the coronavirus vaccine. You're not safe till everyone's safe, right? It's the same with this. It's like there's no point one firm doing well and other firms not doing well from this. Everyone needs to do well in order for us to do well. And so it's really important that we share this stuff. And I think it's fundamentally it's the best commercial decision, because if you're not doing it now, you're not going to have a business in the future, right? Clients are going to ask us to only work in this way pretty soon. And so like it might cost a bit of money now, but you're not going to have a business if you don't do it in the long term. So you have to make that investment of time and effort for people to make those changes. Otherwise, you know, there's no other investment you really should be making at the moment, I think, in terms of having a business that's sustainable financially over the next 10 years.
So I think there are a few good questions coming up. So if you don't mind, I'll just pick on a few of those. One is Richard from Relay Design Agencies asking, with such an international furniture industry, how best can manufacturers reupholster, renew pieces without creating large transport and carbon footprint, which is a fair thing, isn't it? That we're asking them to remanufacture, but you know, so many parts come from different places.
Well, Jamie, would you like to?
I actually think, you know, there's already a process in other industries that around that. You know, other manufacturers manufacture other brands' goods on their license in other parts of the world. So there's no reason why there isn't, and I firmly believe it's on the way, because there's already organisations, you mentioned smaller sort of tertiary organisations that reupholster products and so on, and that already exists here in the UK, just not being shouted about enough at the moment because it's not a big enough market yet, but it's on track. So there's no reason why they can work under license for and on behalf of these international European manufacturers that I know Relay look after, and then they're accredited in some way or shape or form by that manufacturer to do that process for them.
I do think that there's a kind of important question here, which is like, and yeah, this is I'm very contrary. Like, is a second-hand thing better than a new thing, right? And so sometimes that's not the case, you know. So that's where life cycle analysis is really important. EPDs are important to really understand, like, if I'm going to spend all this energy on making this old thing a better new thing, is it more energy than I spent on just buying a new thing? You know, and so you can't, you know, you have to be really smart. You have to consider that sometimes reuse isn't as good as new. That's just a basic fact of it, right? Sometimes there's newer products which will last longer or be more circular or is more recyclable in the future than the thing that you have as an existing asset. So that's when it becomes complicated, right? You really need to look at these things, and it won't always be the case that secondhand is better than new. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But you have to really understand that in detail and look at the science of it, not just make kind of like assumptions of these things.
And that's where the use of certain materials. I saw a comment come up about foam. So foam in commercial furniture industry is a bit of a red herring in the sense that it's not very environmental at all. But we have to use it because there's legislation in place there that says.
Well, and it's also inherently, when you're putting flammable foams into spaces, you have to douse them in flame retardants, which then pose a health risk to the people in that space. But yeah, so foam is
a cost with interliners and so on. Yeah. So I guess, but then going back to the materials thing is that there's clearly certain materials in our industry, furniture industry, that aren't particularly great from a recyclability perspective. And I know recycling is definitely the last resort.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot more of an uptake in use of real timber for desktops and so on, as opposed to aluminium faced chipboard. And of course, that could be refashioned, refinished, reused in many different ways. Sanded down, re-lacquered with water-based lacquer. But no, most manufacturers are now turning to water-based lacquers now, which is obviously a really encouraging sign because of VOC, well offices and so on. So there's definitely positive steps on that front, because as you were saying before, you need more people to do the right thing to try and bring costs down, and that starts to happen with certain materials.
But isn't it also about recognising there is an intrinsic value in the components of those products? So you may not be able to reuse it as a chair or as a desk or whatever, but you don't have to throw the thing away. It's no longer, not necessarily waste. And I think that piece is still yet to come as well.
But fashion, I bought things that I wanted to keep forever. I definitely still have stuff like that for quite a long time. But why don't we go back to looking at furniture as an investment again, as opposed to something that just does a job for a period of time, and having that sort of attitude towards it, as well as just this sort of fast fashion thing. I think that is definitely.
Well, desktops, for example, may have a use of something else. I don't know, loft boards, for example.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't have to be a desk.
No, I think that the reimagining of materials is really a really important part of it. I did a project a long time ago where we used the lift cars as little phone booths. We used the ceiling grills as wall padding. Like, it didn't leave the building site. I think that aesthetic has probably moved on now, unfortunately. But if you're doing a strip out project, look at what's in there and how you could. It's a different design challenge. It's a different design challenge to look at something and imagine how it could be reused locally than going and specifying lots of nice new things, which is also a design challenge. So I think reimagining how the use of a product is really important. It doesn't have to have the same use.
It's so interesting what you said there, though, the aesthetic now has moved on. And I think that's such a, it's such a shame, that, isn't it? Because that, to me, a designer is somebody who creatively is solving a problem. And the problem that we now have, as we've talked about, is the fact that we've just got too much stuff and that fashion is too fast. And the very fact that an aesthetic can move on so that something can't be reused, that, to me, what an amazing, juicy kind of design challenge to say, how can we make this aesthetic aligned with doing the right thing sustainably? And rather than a cut and paste kind of thing, which I do see in a lot of fit outs of just, this is the this is the thing, crystal windows and whatever, it's the thing, so we're just gonna stick it all in. That's what people want, that's the aesthetic.
But I think that is this, probably sort of slightly a tangent, but it goes back to this idea of what new beauty is, and the idea that you can give a view of an interior because the photograph looks nice, right? That's something that really, really frustrates me. And it's kind of like, I'm not going to say it's Instagram's fault or Pinterest's fault, but
you can say that.
Well, yeah. The quality of an interior or a building is only captured in the aesthetic of it. I think for me it is fundamentally wrong, and I think a lot of, I sound like an old man now, but a lot of designers who are designing really great projects at the moment have been brought up in a world where that aesthetic is really easy to achieve or really easy to view. And also clients come to us with Pinterest boards now, right? So
really?
for clients, it's also a really easy kind of mechanism to say what's good and what isn't good. I love projects which look bad but have really. I don't love projects that look bad, but there's value in projects that don't just look good. I guess is what I'm saying. And I think as an industry, as an interiors industry, I guess that we're talking about today, is like making sure that we're celebrating the nature of those projects, as well as the projects that just look good and be put up on walls or whatever on the screen. It's finding ways in our industry to celebrate the good in those things which maybe aren't aesthetic. I think is a big step that we need to take.
Well, I know it's a trite thing to say, but beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So surely it's the entire beauty. You're quite right. I mean, you don't want someone to look ugly. Don't get me wrong.
I don't know. So some, like I go back to fashion. There's some like Nike have done some really amazing products, which are pretty ugly to look at, but actually quite powerful in terms of what they mean. I think awards which just have images, for me, slightly redundant these days. I think there is something that's, as designers, we want spaces that look beautiful, like I say, and that's part of our job, and we get paid to do that, and we have great designers who do that all the time. We also want to look deeper than that, and we want the industry to celebrate looking deeper than that, I guess is our point.
Yeah.
I'll just take this one from Laura. She says, on the subject of reuse as a dealer, and Jamie, you would get this as well as me, we've really struggled to work backwards in terms of asking manufacturers to reupholster or refurbish their existing products, or even at times for certain projects to remanufacture. And recently we've worked on a project, and when we got the project from Perkins and Rowe and went back to the manufacturers and hold on, that's a huge project. What are we talking? How do we do this? And I think it came to a point, it took us a long time, but it came to a point of a lot of conversations, a lot of education. And I think you guys are doing a great job of working directly with a lot of these manufacturers, bringing them in, talking and educating them, right? But how many people are doing that? How many Perkins and Wills are out there? You see what I'm saying? So,
but I mean, that's why I want to go to the Herman Miller showroom, and I want them to say, this is a second-hand chair.
You know what? I think that's a bit, because won't you go to, I'm sorry, I'm not a panelist.
Yeah. You are.
That's a great point. You go to Mercedes, there's always a second-hand showroom next to a new one as well. And that gives you an option and makes you think, okay, hold on, what's wrong? I'm going to go check out. You might take so many clients to a showroom visit. Imagine giving them an option of, oh, that looks good too, and that's secondhand, and it has a story behind it.
The car industry does that.
Yeah. Car industry does that,
It
right?
does.
So
there's standardization within the car industry across the many different brands and the materials they use. Exactly. I actually think in terms of the issues around. She was pointing out there around taking furniture back and reupholstering as infrastructure that is completely lacking in our industry to be able to do that easily. There are some manufacturers in the UK who actually do have that as part of their. Obviously, some of them are quite growing elements of what they do in terms of their services. I know one in Yorkshire that actually does that on behalf of other manufacturers, and they'll take product back and reupholster. So it's there. It's just there's not enough of an appetite.
Well, why aren't organisations like FISP or as furniture manufacturers trade associations should be driving this? I mean, FISP. I've been doing some work with furniture manufacturers, and they join FISP and they need to have like an environmental management system for their company. But again, that's kind of navel gazing. Let's look at the whole system of furniture. There should be logistics centres, logistics processes that all manufacturers can pay a fee towards for the maintenance of that system, re-warrantying, re-upholstering. And as you say, there's a kind of under license, any product can go through that. I mean,
that applies to other materials. I've always thought there should be a massive warehouse outside London that ISG, Overbury, VW, they send all their waste product to. It all gets reorganised there. Logistics is difficult. and then other contractors can then buy that directly.
Yeah,
from
it becomes
that.
an IKEA for us, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Isn't it
Yeah.
because the whole economic structure hasn't traditionally driven that?
No, yeah,
We've
of
all
course,
seen
of
each
course.
other as competitors, and perhaps the last year has taught us that, and that sounds a bit fingers down throat, but hopefully it has taught us that actually you can gain by cooperation.
Yeah, but I don't think it's commercial. I think it's logistics. You know, like everyone buys this new stuff from the same place. Why not buy the second
Yeah,
hand?
yeah.
But the logistics of someone going to each site, collecting the things that aren't used, organising them, warrantying them, put them in storage, cataloguing them, reselling them. That's a big, complicated logistical chunk. Like the only company that could do that now is Amazon, right? And if Amazon took over the second-hand construction market, they'd own it globally.
Let's have a word with them.
Well, that's but you know, so that would be a relatively straightforward thing to do, right? Is to think about because everybody orders too much plasterboard to go to site. Everybody orders too much carpet tiles. You know, there's a lot of stuff.
Oh, there's so much material,
Yeah.
like packaging material coming back, and you need to group things together in order to make them reusable.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a sophisticated waste management. You know, that there's waste vans that drive around London to construction sites, take the organised waste, move it to recycling. But in terms of the reuse products, you know, so it doesn't end up in waste. There isn't a sophisticated kind of like industry for that. So, you know, like when we talk about the furniture, being able to churn furniture and reupholster furniture and all those things, it's great, but that mindset needs to be applied to a whole bunch of other different
Absolutely.
things. And it's a logistical nightmare. But I think there are.
But it's doable.
I think there's a prize at the end of it for someone that can crack it, basically.
Yeah.
I think from a like commercial, industrial perspective, if someone can crack that market, then there's a big prize there, I think, financially for someone. So
Well, I'm going to have to bring us to a close
Yeah, I think,
because we're 2:00. I know we've had huge numbers of people with us today, so we're entirely grateful. And Harsha, can I ask you to close the event?
yeah, no, I think my worry is we've got a lot of comments. Again, we might have missed some important questions there. What I'm going to do is after we finish, I go back to the office, I'll collect all that and send it out to you guys. If you want to comment back, we'll then come back to you guys on our website with our thoughts and views. But this is an ongoing series. It's not just this one time. It can't be. We all have to keep talking about these things. We've had a few conversations before. So we are going to bring more and more on the topic of sustainability, working with companies like Perkins & Will, trying to understand what they are doing, what we all need to do, and bring more conversations on the WOD platform. So keep posted, keep an eye on our website, and you'll hear more from us. But thank you for joining us today, guys.
Appreciate
you all
it.
have a lovely day, and thank you guys for taking
Particularly
time.
Adam for stepping in at the last minute. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having us, yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.
Yeah.